I'm Mike Costello, and I'm here today with Dr. Iris Freelander, and we're going to share with you some thoughts and ideas about the constancy of change. It seems that in all of our lives, we're faced with changes. In New Thought metaphysical philosophy, we spend a lot of time helping people deal with change and become empowered through the reality of change in their lives. And even though sometimes changes seem to bring into our lives difficulty and pain and even suffering, and very few of us embrace change wildly, we know that change is a way for us to grow, and change is a constant of life. And I guess should begin by talking about how important it is to understand that change is a constant in our life, isn't it, Iris?
Indeed, and it's very important too that we know that if we meet change with good humor, it doesn't quite seem so traumatic.
Mhm.
And I think that's the secret, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. And, the changing environment, if we just look at the newspaper, if we look at our individual lives or families, we're just faced with it over and over again. And to be able to look at it with some humor and to be able to confront the reality of change is
Yeah.
really important.
And to know that to be alive is to face change. And it's the alternative would not be to be alive. So as we face change, we can, if we know we're going to be facing, if we accept that yes, we're going to be facing change
Hmm.
and make it an adventure. And if we can make change an adventure, and that those people who are really happy do that.
Right. In our work lives, and I guess there are a variety of ways that we could look at change, but for most of our listeners and for us as well, in our work lives, there are always changes, aren't there?
Yes,
Yeah.
indeed. And if there wasn't, we wouldn't have profit. We wouldn't have a profit margin, would we?
Right.
And so if we again, if we know that that's why we're there, to face change. I know years ago, an employer of mine used to talk about that people were so loath to change, and he really worked with his employees. He had about 100 employees at that one facility, and he worked hard, making them anticipate change, making them want to change. And I think that would be the key, don't you?
Absolutely. And to continually empower people through the process of change, prepare people for change. And I think we need to be conscious of the fact that change is going to come. And
Yeah.
when we think of our work environment in today's workplace, especially, we see a lot of downsizing and we see a lot of changes. And in our counseling work, we talk to a lot of people who are impacted by that and impacted very
Yeah.
negatively.
Yes.
And
Well, it's people who don't want to accept change, who just want the status quo forever. And I think, don't you think that they're into some kind of depression and they're into some kind of, they're still traumatized over some event in their life? Because the normal way we know is to not want change, but also the normal way is to accept that it's inevitable. So it's when people are, we work with them in two ways. One for the depression or the underlying cause, and then with the fact that they don't want to accept change.
that underlying cause, in many cases, has to do with an issue of self esteem.
Yes.
Because so often we believe that if we lose a job or we lose some position that we have, that we're inadequate to get another one. And of course, so often our finances are our concern too. So we think then our income is going to be affected. And of course, if we believe that our income is going to be affected, and then we become depressed about it, what we're really saying to ourselves and about ourselves is, I don't believe I can get another job, or I don't believe that I can replace this income that's lost. When in fact, we know that there isn't a problem replacing a job and replacing income, because as one thing moves out, another thing moves in. And that's very fundamental to our teaching, isn't it?
Exactly, and it's the constancy of change that we can anticipate, expect, and plan toward, and really anticipate with a just to look forward to change. And some people do look forward to change more than others. There are those, and I think there's certain birth, the 12 birth signs,
Mhm.
and certain people of those birth signs seem to anticipate change more than others. Some are more timid and shy and frightened of change, of facing something that they don't know what they're facing. And so to know ourselves is so important. To know that, yes, we do get hung up on whatever it is we get hung up on. But to know ourselves
Mhm.
is, and then we can accept whatever happens.
Okay. We also have to be cautious about doing things the way we've always done them. Isn't that true? And
Yeah,
so often we want to do things the way we've always done them. And we build our lives on tradition and we build our lives upon custom and routine. And sometimes we need to break that and we need to be cautious of the fact that maybe we're doing something too much the same as it used to be.
I know you're very good about that at the church of shaking everyone up and bringing on change. And that's a wonderful thing because it's a very important part of our lives. And if we can accept the change there, we can accept the change other places.
hmm But so many people resist that change because I think it's the comfort, isn't it, that
Yes,
they feel
yes.
with constancy.
Well, we can look to our own lives and see that. I know I can see it in mine. When things are not too comfortable in all of my life, that if I've gone through some kind of traumatic experience and we all go into some slight depression one time or another, and it might just be the weather, but who knows, it's various things. But it's how we feel inside ourselves, as you said, the self-image, that makes us accept or not or reject change. So if we know ourselves and know that I know a lady whom I knew about 30 years ago told me that every January she went into a very grave depression. And I tried to work with her on it, and I wasn't doing professional counseling work at that time, but I worked with her and helped her see that this is something that happens in her life. And now they have a name for it, SAD. And so we just have to really look deeply within ourselves and see what's happening there.
hmm
And she showed that. And so then when she realized that she did it every year, and when she got out in the sunlight, and if she took a walk every day, it made all the difference in the world because she was getting the sunlight, which the doctors today know that we need to do.
hmm And if she thought every year that she was going to have this situation, so often that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, doesn't it?
Very often that's true. But I think she is one of those that the doctors pinpoint as having the SAD syndrome, where if they don't get enough sunlight, then they go into a depression.
hmm
And I think that happens to many to some degree.
hmm
It happens to older people who are afraid to get out in the weather because of the weather, or they don't want to get out for various reasons. They just stay in a great deal. And during the winter months when it's dark, then they go into even greater depression. It's just a self-fulfilling.
hmm And often it requires that we do something, like in the case of this lady, and in the case of many changes that
Hmm.
come into our lives, we're prompted to change even more in order to meet the change,
Yes,
to change our behavior or to change our thoughts or to change even the way that we feel.
yes. Very often, just a walk will do that. Isn't that interesting?
hmm
That it's so simple. Life is so simple. We just make it more difficult. But if we look to see what does it for us and then do that, and I know for myself and then for a lot of other people, if they take a walk every day, then their whole life looks better and brighter.
hmm So, if you're dealing with change, as we all are, and if our listeners would have a difficulty dealing with a change, one of the beginning points is to kind of step out of the situation and maybe take a walk. Isn't that a
Yes.
good idea? Yeah.
Yes, early in the morning if they can, because it seems to set the pace for the day when they walk early in the morning. I know that worked for my friend years ago. It helped her more to walk the first thing in the morning than it did later in the day. I think because probably her endorphins or whatever were acting already set for the day from the morning being depressed. But if she walked the first thing, and I know you work out early in
hmm
the morning, and I do. I walk, and the days I don't are really not as bright for me as the days when I do.
hmm Now, you still exercise?
Yes, I
Yeah.
do. Yeah.
So that value of exercise too in dealing with
It
change
makes
is
a big
important.
difference
Yeah.
because it's like you say so beautifully at the church all the time. We live in our minds and not in the world. So we live in our minds in relation to change. It's how we view it, as you know,
hmm
that makes the difference. So if we see life more brightly, if we exercise and keep our body toned up, then it's a given that we will just be lighter and brighter during the day. There are so many new books available on anti-aging. Everyone's talking about anti-aging, and it's really a wonderful thing that these books are coming out because people are living longer and they need to have more quality to life if they're going to live longer. And so it's a marvelous thing that they tell us how. And this many of them don't. I was reading one yesterday that didn't say face change valiantly,
Hmm.
but that's in fact what it was saying.
Hmm. Hmm. And of course, by doing that, by facing change valiantly and being adaptable to it and being open to it, I think as we age or move into to later life or
Yeah.
through life, no matter
Yes.
where we are in it, it has less negative impact upon us. So it's not actually the aging that's the problem. The problem is being
No.
negative in our aging process, because
Yeah.
we've all seen people who are 80, 70, 80, 90 years old who are vibrant people, and yet
Exactly.
they're very happy to be the age that they are. But they're also people who have been willing to adapt and accept the changing environment and realities of life.
That is the key, isn't it? That they have accepted it, anticipated it, and then worked with it in a wholesome, happy way instead of resisting. Because resistance is negativity, and if whatever we resist is going to be that much more imprinted in our
Mhm.
consciousness. So we could tell our audience that that would be very important too.
Let's talk for a minute about the concept you just shared, which was imprinting things on our consciousness. And that's the feeling of change, or the response that we have to change, is impacted upon our consciousness,
Yes,
whether we're aware of it or not, isn't
yes,
it? And for some of us, it's impacting our consciousness in a very negative way.
yes. And we are imprinted from birth. Well, now doctors are saying before birth and during gestation, the imprinting starts. And I believe it does. I think it comes over from other lives. And we are imprinted, but we can change any imprint. And so as we go through life, we can just, whatever we want to do, we can do.
Mhm.
Isn't it exciting?
It is extremely exciting. And we can always change
Yes,
in the midst of change.
yes.
We can change the way that we think. And that's what we spend a lot of time in this program and at the church talking about. And that is teaching people how to change their way of thinking so that they can become empowered and strengthened in life, so that they can become the happy people that they're designed to be. Uh,
That's right. And I think that it's, someone said we're just about as happy as we make up our minds to be.
mhm.
And that's part of it. You know, we again imprinting in a healthy way, happy way, or imprinting in a negative way. And if we do too much of it, the negativity, then it takes hold.
Mhm.
And it shows in our faces too.
It does. It
It's
does.
the doctors are showing, you know, it's a wonderful thing that doctors are now becoming more holistic, all doctors. And by holistic, I mean looking at the whole person. And they're viewing the entire person now instead of just parts and bits and pieces of the person that's causing the problem at the moment, because we are a whole person. And so when we do that, when we view ourselves in that light, we can see that negativity etches lines in our faces and the lines that we don't want.
Mhm.
Disappointment causes our mouths to droop. And so we know that all these things happen. And so, and makes our eyes dull. Lack of anticipation gives us a dullness in our eyes. So all we can study ourselves. And years ago, I taught at a modeling school, and one thing we taught every class is study yourself, do all you can to change that which you wish to, and then forget yourself. And that would be true, wouldn't it, in our subject today of facing change? Because we need to see what it is we don't like about ourselves and then see how we can change it. Everything, as you said earlier, can be changed.
Mhm.
So we'd like our audience to just really view themselves and review themselves in a very wholesome, loving, accepting way, but to see what it is they don't like. And it might have been okay at one time, but now it isn't. It might be okay in the future, but now it isn't. Because living in the present time, we just have to know what we need at this time.
Hmm. And we have to be open to circumstances and situations that not only may not be the way we want them to be, but over which we may have very little control. You
Exactly.
know, and so often we want to believe we have control, or we want to exert control, but many things we have no control over.
Exactly. And as our lives change, we have sometimes we live alone, sometimes we live with others, sometimes we live with a lot of people at one time. So that would be the important thing, is to know what it is in our lives that we do and don't like, and then make those changes.
Making changes is a tremendously important part of what this program is about, and what metaphysical philosophy and religious belief is about. And we'd like to pause at this point in the program and give you an opportunity to obtain some useful information for your study at home.
We would like to give you the opportunity to explore and discover in your own home the new thought teachings that this program is sharing with you by sending you a free copy of one of these booklets. Simply address your request to Confident Living at P.O. Box 7726, Long Beach, California, 90807. Whatever your dream, whatever your vision, you can reach it through confident living.
As we continue the discussion today about change, we would like to invite you to examine your own life, your individual life, and how it is you respond to and deal with change. And if change is a painful thing for you, if any kind of change in your life is painful, we invite you to begin to think about ways in which you could more positively and affirmatively view those changes. And if we're helping people to do that, how could we lay the groundwork, Iris?
Well, one is to study themselves and see what it is that's making them why they can't accept change. And some change is inevitable. It's like we all lose people in death whom we love, and those things are inevitable. So we have to know, I think the strengthening our faith would be the key there. Because if we have faith, we're not going to worry about other people's lives. We're not going to worry that they're messing up in their lives and doing the wrong things. And we can accept then that when someone does go or is inevitably ill, that it's a natural course of events. So those would be the things that I would think we need to accept the inevitable and not say, why me, God, but just look to life as what can I do to help the people around me? What can I do to help myself? But to not get too mired down in just one thing that happens in our lives.
Right. And not to become too preoccupied with the whys of it.
Right.
And so often, some wise person said years ago that when people ask why, they're not really looking for a solution, they're looking for an argument or a fight. And I think that's very true.
Yes.
And when we're children, we do it, and when we're adults, we do it. And of course, when change comes into our lives, a classic example is what you just mentioned, and that being death, or an illness, or a loss of a job, or difficulty with a child, or some tragedy, then we begin to say, why does this happen to me? Then that builds upon pity, and then pity again begins to detract from our issues of self-worth and individual value and stamina, and we just become more and more defeated in the process, don't we?
Yes, indeed. And we can look at our lives and feel that something's happened in our life that's not ever happened to anyone else's, but everything happens in everyone's life. And I've seen people facing the death of a child, and to me that's one of the saddest things on earth that anyone can ever face. But they'll say, why me? And they'll say, why did it have to happen? As you said, the why is a form of denial or evasion, I think, don't you?
It is, it is. And I think the question should be, as you said a few moments ago, is what?
Yes.
What shall I do now?
Yes.
What does this bring to me?
Yes.
And of course, in our philosophy, we believe that every change, even the most traumatic change, is bringing a lesson.
Yes.
And that we're here to learn the lessons of life. And one of the things that metaphysical teachers and leaders have said for the last 100 years is that life is the school of the soul. And we certainly teach that, and we certainly believe it. And it goes right to the core of what we also mentioned a few moments ago, and that is our faith. And that is that if we have faith in the presence and the power of God in our lives, if we have faith in the love that God has for all of us, regardless of what the condition or circumstance appears, then we're able to step into a new dimension and understand that every one of these experiences and every one of these changes that have come into your experience, my experience, and everyone's experience is bringing us a lesson that's teaching us something that is magnificently important for our soul's growth and really makes life worthwhile and meaningful, even in the midst of the problem. And I think it's really important to distinguish what we teach versus what many traditionalists teach in terms of suffering.
Yeah.
And that is that the idea of just giving up and having some great value in the suffering is not what we teach at all. We teach that through the suffering or through the challenge or through the difficulty or through the obstacle, we come to know the overcoming power, and it's the lesson that we learn. And that it has nothing to do with God's vengeance or judgment or the will of God or any of those kinds of things. It has to do with the fact that changes come to all of us. They bring us the lessons we need. They strengthen and empower us. And the relationship that we have with each other and the relationship that we have with God has nothing to do with the obstacle or the change, but everything to do with how we feel about it and how we respond to it.
That's very wonderfully said. And if we can remember those words, and when we're facing change, then we would feel more comfortable with change. And as we face change, again, if we know they're inevitable, then we just know that certain things are going to happen in our lives, and we go along on an even keel. Life mostly is a fairly even keel. So we face our valleys and we face the mountains. And as we face those variances, then we wouldn't want everything to be just happier, because we know that that's not normal. And so we would think that, well, we're not really alert and wide awake if that's what happens, because we can't appreciate one without the other. It's the shadow and the light, the darkness and the light. And so if we know that these are the inevitable facts of life, then we can face change without saying, why me? And again, if we can, I've said before, make it an adventure. If we can make whatever happens an adventure, but certain things that happen that are really hard, like death and illness and so forth, and divorce for many, there are many things that happen in life that are inevitable. If we can know that this too shall pass, that would be a good thing for everyone to remember.
And regardless of what we think about it, it is going to pass.
Yes.
And whether we are able to deal with it or whether we're able to, or whether we're defeated by it, is really our choice.
Yes.
And that's not to say that there won't be times when changes and challenges come that we won't be defeated and hurt for a period of time. But we need to get on with it, and we need to really embrace the reality of this circumstance and situation. And of course, as metaphysicians teach, and of course for a lot of people, it's a very difficult concept to understand, and we have to be cautious as we share this, but what we say in metaphysics so often is, so we need to embrace and love the negative experiences of life.
Yes.
Because as we're able to welcome those into our lives, we're able to learn the lessons that we need to learn, we're able to be empowered, and we're able to move on.
Yes. And when we do move on, if we can move on happily, if we can move on with anticipation, I think when people are hopeless, that's the worst part. If they lose hope, it means they've lost faith. Isn't that true? So how would we tell people to gain renewed hope, to gain renewed faith?
I think to continue to go back to the fundamental relationship that we have with each other and with God. And I think that is really the crux of all of our problems. We have an idea that we're separated, number one, from each other, and number two, that we're separated from God. And also we have the problem in our society and in our theological evolution of believing that the will of God changes, that this is God's will and that's God's will and this happens and that happens, when in fact God is constant, just like change is constant, but God is constant. And so God's feeling for us and desire for us is good and only good. And that really is a tremendous foundation that should help to sustain us in all kinds of hopeless circumstances and situations. And that is that presence and power is going to guide us and direct us to action, not that presence and power is going to take over and do what needs to be done. And that's a real important distinction. And certainly in metaphysical philosophy, we believe that God does not do it for us, that we are empowered by the strength and grace of God, and that strength and grace empowers and moves us to respond and react to circumstances and situations. It empowers us, but we can't just fold our hands and let God do it. You know.
That's correct. And very often we need an impetus to help us along that way of thinking. And there are many wonderful books out, and they can use videotapes, cassette tapes. But there's one book a friend gave me recently called Final Gifts, and it's about people's last days on earth, mostly hospice patients. And the gift they left, the people who were left behind, were just beautifully expressed. And very often it was just encouragement, hope, and love that they were giving.
And that's key. And I think one of the things that we need to do is talk to each other and support each other,
Yes,
and continue to do that.
yes. And as long as we do that, and not to be afraid, I know I was with my a relative when she was dying, and I told her sister, if you want to say goodbye, the time is now. And she says, I wouldn't know what to say. And I said, well, I know you love her. Just tell her you love her. And she was so grateful for that gift. And that was the final gift that she received from her sister by being able to say goodbye in a coherent way and then receiving a message back from that sister. So we can just keep our thoughts centered and know that we're a part of God, Creator God. And as long as we know we're a part of God, then I think it gives us, that's strengthening, don't you?
It's absolutely strengthening, and to, in that way, never feel alone.
Yes.
Because that feeling of aloneness, loneliness, is really so often devastating for us, especially in times of change. We need to know that we're not alone.
Yes, because when the life looks too dark, then we have that feeling of aloneness, and we can be alone and be happier than we've ever been, but we can be lonely and be the most miserable we've ever been. So again, it's all in our head.
We live in our minds and not in the world. That's fundamental to what we teach in this program, and that's fundamental to metaphysical philosophy and faith. And Dr. Freelander and I have been talking to you today about ways in which we can deal with the constancy of change. We invite you to embrace change, to welcome change, and to know that change brings to you exactly what you need in this life. We hope that you found this information useful, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
This program is a community outreach of Christ Church. Dr. Mike Costello speaks each Sunday morning at 11 a.m., and Dr. Iris Freelander speaks on Wednesday evenings at 7 p.m. at the church. On Sunday evenings at 6 p.m., there is a meditation and healing service. Come and join us. You will be warmly welcomed.